snowflakes. So I love going out in the wintertime and shooting snowflakes. It's challenging. Sometimes you don't get good snowfall. Sometimes you don't get any snowfall where I live. Sometimes you'll go an entire season with no snowfall. So I do love the challenge of getting a beautiful snowflake in front of my camera. So hopefully after this video, you will want to go out and try it yourself. So my gear is a Canon 5D Mark IV attached to my Canon. You can use any DSLR with manual settings. You can use a crop body, actually works very well because it gives you a little more reach and makes your snowflake appear larger in the frame. This is a Canon MPE 65mm 1x to 5x magnification lens, highly specialized macro lens. Don't go out and buy this lens if you're just starting with macro. You'd want to work your way up to this and make sure that you really love it before you do that. You can use any macro lens. My other macro lens is a 100mm f2.8 Canon lens. The only thing is, if you're using a lens like that as opposed to a lens like this, is the regular standard macro lens, you'll just have to crop it in post-processing to make it appear bigger in the image. Whereas this lens acts as a microscope almost, and it will go up to 5x magnification, so it will make your little snowflake fill the entire frame. I have a Yongnuo LED ring flash attached to the front of this, just a standard ring flash. If you wanted to upgrade significantly, you can use the Canon MT24EX flash head. This goes on the front of your lens, and it has articulating arms, and it pivots, and it does all sorts of fancy stuff. Don't go out and buy this unless you really get into macro photography. It's a piece of gear that's pretty pricey for what it does, unless you're really into it. I have my Canon 5D4 mounted on a Really Right Stuff BH55 ball head, which is total overkill for this, I understand, but that's the ball head I use. I have it mounted to a Platypod Max. Platypod is great for macro photography. I have that on a wooden box. It's just a wooden box that I put little felt feet on the bottom, so that I use this as a riser basically, and the little felt feet allow me to move the camera closer and further away from my subject. This lens doesn't have focus. You have to move the camera either further or closer to the subject to get the item in focus, or move your subject itself. And the box allows me to slide it in and out on the table to get the thing in focus, to get the subject in focus. So what I do with snowflake photography is I have a black t-shirt stretched over. This is my husband's old bass drum skin, but you can use a piece of foam core or a piece of like wooden paneling that isn't too heavy. Anything that will allow you to stretch a black t-shirt or some sort of black fabric over the top. And I have artist paintbrush that I get from the craft store. And you don't want a crazy hairy brush. You want something that will come to a very fine point, because what you do is you wet the brush. I wet the brush because the moisture allows your snowflake to stick to the brush. Snowflakes have static electricity, and I don't want the snowflake dancing around on the edge of my brush, so I moisten it. I come over here, I go outside, I catch some snowflakes, I let them build up a little bit, and then I go, oh, there's a good one, and I'll pick up the snowflake with my brush, and depending on temperature, I will either come right to the front of my camera, get the item and get the snowflake in focus, and then take the shot. Or if it's a little cooler out, if it's cold, if it's a little colder out, I use this. And what this is called a helping hand, and this is a watchmakers use it. It basically just has two alligator clips on the end, and I have it tie wrapped to an old Kiss VHS cassette box because the foot isn't very big and I need more stability. And what you do is you take your brush, you clip it on there, You get it in focus, you take your shot. You can't use this if it's very warm outside, relatively warm. The upper 20s, like 29 to 32 degrees, you don't have time to set all this up. If it's that warm out, you come over, you grab your snowflake, you pick it up, you take it in front, you hand hold it, you take the shot, you move on to the next flake. There is just no time when it's that warm out to mess around with something like this. It will melt. It will melt right in front of your eyes. You'll have about 10 seconds before this snowflake melts. Not completely, but it'll degrade enough to where it's not even worth shooting. If it's colder out and it's 22 degrees or colder, and then you have time to mess around and lollygag and, oh, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put this over here and I'm going to put this over here, and you have time if it's very cold out. But if it's warm, you have to hustle. And when it's cold, you want these. These are hand warmers, hot hands they're called. The drugstore sell them, Home Depot sells them. I usually buy them at the end of the season, a big box of them, because they're cheap, and I save them for the next year. And believe me, when you're sitting out shooting snowflakes for 3 hours and it's 18 degrees outside, you will want these in your gloves. Makes a huge difference. This is for my background of my shot. It's just a rainbow feather duster. What I do is, because this lens has such a short depth of field, very narrow depth of field, I can put it just a couple of inches behind my subject, and this will completely blur. And it just gives a nice color. You won't see feathers, it'll just be blurry color in the background, and it really makes for a nice shot. You could also do black background if you chose. I just prefer the color with snowflakes. And that is my snowflake setup. So I hope you will go out and try it, and let's go shoot some snowflakes.